Hi, everyone. This is Miranda with the Valuable Voices podcast. Thanks for being on today. Jeff, I'm super excited to hear your story. I know we met in a Facebook podcast group, and just thank you for being on today.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, like I said, I just love hearing what God's doing in everybody's life. Everybody's story is so unique, and let's just dive in. So, kind of tell us what got you to what you're doing today, and we'll share all the links and all that fun stuff. But yeah, kind of tell us a little bit of your story.
Oh, sure. I'm going to say about the first half of my life was really deep in searching, but wasn't fruitful in the sense of landing me somewhere. At some points in there, you get to think, so like seeker kind of implies you're going to find something at some point. So where is this thing going to be found?
Right.
Um, and being a good child of this century, thinking and learning and rationality seemed like a kind of logical way to go. I found myself as I got my degree in philosophy, my undergraduate degree, and found myself at a competitive and relatively elite graduate school. And at that time, I would tell people my plan is to climb into an ivory tower and lock myself inside. And somewhat ironically to the way things would turn out, my life plan, I'm never going to have kids. I'm never going to get married, is such an old fashioned concept. I found the person of Jesus to be really interesting, and I found the people who identified as his followers to be less interesting. Let's just say. And then found myself madly in love with somebody who turned out to be a Christian,
Wow.
and we ended up married. And the early time of our marriage, neither of us were remotely prepared for. And we
Are
slipped
any of
into,
us?
yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think you get there until you've been there.
Yeah.
Um, but so she, we slipped into bad ways to treat other human beings. And for a brief time, it was both of us engaged in all kinds of foolishness. And there was a point at which I kind of looked in the mirror one morning and I realized I was the one that was repeating the script and she was not. And somehow, even though I was being very unkind, she was managing to like receive that and transform that.
Wow.
And I think that what that opened up in me is, well, what does she have that I don't have? How is she able to do that? It's funny to me because we give so much time and energy to, I'm going to talk you into believing this, and I am
Yeah.
the most conceptual, like attempting to be logical person that I know of. I'd read all the no, I can't say all. I had read lots of stuff from lots of world religions,
Sure. Yeah.
and for me, at least, if talking somebody into it was the way to get there, I would have got there before that. But it wasn't talking me
Right.
into it that got there. It was her, it was her example that got me there.
Wow. Well, first of
Yeah,
all, that's really humble of you to say. I mean, it takes someone pretty special and a man to say that, especially just in this day and age. So thank you for just
yeah.
saying that and recognizing that.
Thank you. Um, and yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So we found a church that was really right for us at that time, and it's really wonderful people that became family to us. And for a while, for 10 good years, it was a really good place to be. I learned a lot about Jesus and what it means to follow him in that place. Um, and eventually life sort of happened again,
Sure.
and some, yeah, yeah, it does. In some ways, like, to me, that time has like a parallel to the Garden of Eden, that time in that wonderful church. There was like an innocence about it,
Mhm.
and like some joy in there and things. And um along the way, there was things I noticed that nobody talked about in that church very much. And, you could read in one chapter, Jesus says, like, sit inside me. And then in the next chapter, Jesus might say, I want to be inside you.
Right.
Um, and my rational brain really grabbed onto that stuff because it seemed like how can you, I can put a sandwich inside a bag, and I suppose I could crumple up the bag and put it inside the sandwich, but I can't do the both of those things at the same time. How does that even
That
work?
is such a cool analogy. I love that.
Thank you. I
Wow.
appreciate that. Um, and I've come to find that I was really lucky because when I was asking questions, everybody would shrug their shoulders at me, but nobody would like sort of judge me and put me in on the naughty list. And I know that there's places in the world that in many communities in the world that you start to ask questions like this, and people start to look at you funny. And I can't say that anybody looked at me funny in that place, but I do think that my questions and people shrugging their shoulders, it was, I don't know, it was a little bit like I was asking, how can you, I want to go learn about blacksmithing. In the year 2022, nobody needs to know how to go blacksmithing. So people would look at me like, well, that seems like a funny thing to care about, but
Yeah.
okay, go do you and go look into it and stuff. Um, and that started a journey that there weren't really many steps for me about. And I think that was where I began to get interested in contemplation and spiritual practice. And the fact that there's hundreds of years of Christians who have worked out a lot of things that we don't seem often to be very interested in, like sort of mining their wisdom.
Mhm.
I found myself on a journey when I was reading these accounts of people that would talk about, I had Jesus inside me and I was inside Jesus at the same time. Teresa of Avila and Meister Eckhart and those sorts of characters. Um, and nobody in that particular environment was opposed to that stuff, but nor did they see anything interesting. But eventually life came up on me, and some really hard things happened. Mental health challenges hit my family in an enormous way.
Mm.
um, and there was still a lot of love and creativity and passion for us, but we started to become somebody else to them. And I've got a lot of reflections about that time and human beings how human beings treat each other when they're suffering.
Yeah. Wow.
And um, and one of the things I started to think about is, we get these ideas about the way that God works in the world, and we're told to do our best to like emulate Christ. And so if we start with a model that God lives very separate from us and occasionally swoops in to rescue us, then we're going to sit separate from the people who are suffering and occasionally swoop in to rescue them. And I don't have any problem with a youth group driving down to Mexico to like paint somebody's church or something. But it's also a really interesting picture to me about the way we approach suffering, that we're separate, you're other, and we're going to come in occasionally from our like sort of symbolic heaven and rescue you. And I became the rescue mission, not somebody who was like in community with people
Sure.
anymore.
Okay.
And I also think that human beings, and I'm not immune to this, I realize I do it too, but we tend to think that all kinds of suffering are contagious. And there gets to be a little bit of like, I am scared of a universe where something so random could happen and really mess your life up in a big way. So I've got to define all the things that are happening in a way that I'm protected from it. Because if mental health, Jeff, if you were doing everything right and these kinds of troubles could come and really like uproot your whole existence, then it's terrifying to think that could happen to me. So
Mm.
I've got to like make a mental list of all the things I'm doing that will protect me from that. And sometimes those lists are right, and sometimes those things are accurate, but more often they're I don't know, they're little superstitious lucky charms that we're holding on to in the belief that bad things can't happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
um,
Interesting.
Thank you. Um, so it became time to leave that community eventually, and the people that were on my radar a lot were talking about all these spiritual practices. They were talking about contemplation more and more. And largely because of a lot of decisions I made under duress, but still I made them and I'm willing to own them. One of the various aspects of my life that had just been blown up was my finances. Money was like
Yeah.
non-existent. We were barely getting by. And so, all right, podcast, all right, deep progressive Christian thinker, you're using this word spiritual practice, you're using this word contemplation. What does it mean? And what I found out is for $49.95, I could find out what it means.
Okay.
Everybody had their little thing, and people are allowed to make money. That people
Yeah.
buy my books, and I'm making money, and
Right.
things like that. But the thing that was so clear to me as I began to climb out of that really dark place is it should be easier. We've
Yeah.
got thousands of years of people that have been kind of working these issues out, and we've just kind of like thrown it all away. And many of our modern solutions are wonderful and great, but many of them are sort of impoverished,
Sure.
for lack of being willing to kind of give some due respect to those people. And so the promise I made to myself is one of the things I want to do is I want to just make it easier for the next person.
Yeah.
I'm not. I think it's important to speak our truth, and I think that there is a value to talking about Jesus. But I also think that there's a lot of ego involved in those kinds of quote acts of evangelism are really about like I've got these insecurities inside me, and if I can get you to talk about how convinced you are of everything, that's going to like assuage all these insecurities inside my own self. So I do my best to keep my ego in check and not be not have that sort of cheap brand of evangelism about the things I do. I don't want to like run, I don't want to walk down Main Street with a sandwich board saying meditate or burn. Um,
We laugh, but it's true. I mean,
yeah,
we've all seen it.
yeah.
Oh,
So a lot of my journey has been about being transparent about where some of my struggles were, wanting talking conversations about mental health to not be something that is we're sort of ashamed of, and to try to make the path easier for the next person who walks down, who might be in a similar spot to where I was.
awesome. And I think that's a lot of people that I talk to. I mean, you summed it up really well, but it's like we go through our hard, our dark, and if we can come around on top after getting through something and teach others the way, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's
Yes.
really, I think, what a lot of people are doing. And I admire that. It's like, yeah, make it easier for somebody else so they don't have to do all the work that you did, all the as much maybe pain or suffering. So I love that. That's very commendable. So I'll put the link and everything here, but tell us where people can find you to find out more and what your book is about and all of that, please.
Sure. So my most recent book is called Words Made Flesh. And the thing I was thinking about is that for me, and I know for so many people, they'll read the Bible because it feels like a duty. And they'll have that kind of head knowledge about like, this is really important stuff. And then they'll pick up what they just bought at Barnes and Noble or whatever and be transported to a whole different universe. And it's so much easier and more fun to read, I don't know, Stephen King or Tom Clancy or whoever's your poison, and to be transformed. And then like, all right, now it's time to do my chores. Now it's time to eat my vegetables. I'm gonna pick up the Bible and I'm gonna read that because I have to, and things. And uh, I guess I'm sort of saying the same thing repeatedly, but like people have already worked through these problems. We just haven't paid attention to how they did it. And so Words Made Flesh focuses on 4 different practices. I have a section about prayer, specifically as driven by the Bible and as a tool to help understanding of the Bible. A section on journaling, which is the same. And then I turned the clock back a little bit further and went to 2 more traditional practices. One's called holy imagining, which invites us to pick up the sensory details. One of the main components is picking up the sensory details in the characters and really putting ourselves into that scene. And the irony is that we do that with secular books all the time when we allow ourselves to be transported to that, like, whatever scene is going on in the book we're reading on the beach. And it's really about carrying those over. But Christians were doing this in the year 1500 with the Gospels and things like that. And the final practice in the book is Lectio Divina, which is Latin for holy imagining. And sometimes that gets thrown together. I'm sorry, it's Latin for prayerful reading.
Okay.
And sometimes it gets thrown together with holy imagining, but you can really, like, sort of treat them differently and dial down a little deeper into them. And Lectio is a 4-step process that's about looking for what the Spirit is stirring in our hearts as we're reading on the page, and kind of holding this dynamic tension of prayer and scripture reading at the same time.
Wow.
Within the book, as sort of a test case, I use the 4 Gospels chronologically. So I've kind of got a twofold hope that people might pick up the 4 practices. They might either incorporate them into a spiritual practice or even begin a spiritual practice if they don't have one. But I also think that if you take that kind of chronological look and apply these practices to Jesus's life, you end up with a newer and more robust experience of who Jesus was and what he was all about. So that particular book is Words Made Flesh by Jeff Campbell. You can find it on Amazon for now. I think I'm going to go wide pretty soon, and you'll find it on other places soon. On that. Campbell does have there's a number of Jeff Campbells in the world. Most of them spell it with a silent P in the middle. It's Campbell. But if you put both the title and my name, it'll come up very quickly and very easily to your search. I have one of the things I like to say whenever I'm making an appearance anywhere is, one part of my story is about wanting things to be accessible to everybody. And I've been in places that I would not have had $10 for a book, that just didn't have that dispensable income. So a really important part of my practice as a writer is that if I ever hear that somebody would benefit by the things I'm doing, I would be really honored to get a copy into people's hands through that. So probably the best way to contact me is through the website where I curate spiritual practices. I think I've got about 80 of them now. And that is at thefaithingproject.com. Faith, like I believe in stuff, and then the letters ing at the end, because one of the things I really was thinking a lot about is the idea of, like, how do you do faith? If somebody wanted to know about what are some actions I can take, and I don't for one second think that contemplative prayer replaces all the things you should do if you're a person of faith, but I think it's some action steps that you can take if you're not sure what's next. So looking for my books on Amazon, using the contact form at my website, which is thefaithingproject.com, are probably the 2 best ways to look me on up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What a pleasure. I love, you summarized that very well, very concisely. I'm sure you could go on and on and on, but I love giving people just a glimpse. And then, you know what? You want more? Go check him out. So you guys, thanks for sharing, Jeff. Again,
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to see someone kind of doing the work and then helping others more quickly. And I love that. I've been in places I can't afford a $10 book as well. So thank you for that, and just throwing that out there. So you guys check him out, faithingproject.com, right?
Yep.
We'll put that in the notes. But yeah, thanks, Jeff, for being on, and let's keep in touch. I love what you're doing, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so very much.
Thanks everyone for listening. Have a great day.